How did people live before central heating? Imagine this. The dead of winter, temperatures collapsing far below freezing, and wind not merely blowing, but howling against your walls. Today, you turn a small plastic dial, and warmth rushes in like a loyal companion. But for 99.9% of human history, that effortless moment was impossible. For our ancestors, winter was not a season. It was an enemy, a silent killer waiting for the fire to fade. These people built empires, raised families, and created the foundations of civilization while living in homes so cold that water could freeze inside a glass. The question is, how? The camera draws closer as I speak from a warm, lamplit study. Welcome back to Historia Prime. Today, we're stripping away every modern comfort. No thermostats, no insulation, no radiators, to uncover the raw, ingenious, and sometimes dangerous ways humans battled the cold. From smoke-filled prehistoric caves to Roman heated floors and the early innovations that reshaped entire societies, this is the story of how warmth shaped human survival. By the end, you won't just learn how people heated their homes, you'll understand how the quest for warmth influenced architecture, family life, and even social hierarchy. And you might walk away with a few survival tricks that still matter today. So grab a blanket, settle in, and let's confront the question our ancestors lived with every winter. How did people survive before central heating? The first flame, intelligence in the cave. Our journey into the past doesn't begin a few centuries ago. It begins hundreds of thousands of years before the first city rose or the first tool was shaped from bronze. We often imagine early humans as crude, shivering figures huddled blindly around a fire. But the evidence tells a far more astonishing story, one of engineering, intention, and quietly brilliant survival, long before the word civilization even existed. Fire was humanity's first technology, a tool so powerful that archaeologists believe controlled use may stretch back as far as 1.9 million years. Yet using fire inside a shelter was not simple. One mistake could turn warmth into death. Place the fire too far inside the cave, and smoke collects until you suffocate. Place it too close to the entrance, and the winter wind steals every bit of heat your life depends on. With survival as the answer. And then came one of the most remarkable discoveries in prehistoric archaeology. In France's Lazaret Cave, researchers studying the remains of a 170,000-year-old campsite found something unexpected. These pre-Neanderthals weren't improvising, they weren't guessing, they were calculating airflow long before mathematics had a name. They positioned their hearth at a precise point in the cave, an aerodynamic sweet spot, where smoke lifted upward and escaped naturally, while heat radiated efficiently across the living space. If they had shifted that fire even a few meters, smoke poisoning. If they pulled it toward the entrance, freezing winds would extinguish their only defense against the cold. But they didn't. They solved the puzzle, night after night. This single decision, where to place a flame, reveals a level of spatial intelligence that challenges every stereotype of early humans. They were not just surviving the cold, they were managing it, reading their environment like a blueprint. And here is the modern lesson hidden inside this ancient cave. Survival isn't merely about having resources. It is about understanding how to use space, airflow, and positioning to your advantage. Even today, in a true survival situation, placing your heat source relative to ventilation could be the difference between preserving warmth and losing your life. From the very first flame, humanity wasn't just fighting the cold. We were learning to outthink it. The Roman miracle, hypocausts. Fast forward now, thousands of years beyond the caves and the first controlled flames. The world is still shivering around open fires, still relying on smoke-filled pits and drafty shelters. Yet in one corner of the ancient world, something extraordinary is happening, something so advanced it would not be equaled for more than a millennium. Welcome to the Roman miracle. Imagine stepping into a Roman villa on a freezing winter morning. You remove your sandals, expecting the sting of icy stone beneath your feet. But instead, the floor is warm. The walls breathe gentle heat. There is no smoke, no soot, not even a flicker of flame in sight. Just a quiet, invisible comfort that feels almost modern. How did they achieve this? The answer lies beneath your feet. The Romans engineered their floors to float on stacks of small tile pillars called pilae. Outside the home, a furnace roared day and night, tended by enslaved workers who fed it constantly. The blazing air traveled under the raised floor, then climbed through hollow channels inside the walls, caloducts, before finally escaping through vents in the roof. The entire house, from stone tiles to plastered walls, became a radiant heating system. In their famous bathhouses, this technology could push the hot room to 120 degrees Fahrenheit, with humidity so intense it felt like stepping onto another planet. It was, in essence, central heating, 2,000 years before the modern world caught up. But as awe-inspiring as this system was, it reveals a darker truth woven into history. Comfort was not free. The hypocaust devoured forests. It demanded endless labor from people with no freedom. Only the wealthiest elites could afford this luxury, while the majority of the empire still huddled around smoky fires. And when Rome collapsed, so did the knowledge. The technology vanished. Europe plunged back into the cold, literally, and humanity would spend centuries trying to reclaim what the Romans had once mastered. The hypocaust stands as both a triumph and a warning. It shows how ingenuity can leap centuries ahead, but also how fragile knowledge becomes when held only by the few. The long winter, medieval survival. For nearly 1,000 years after the fall of Rome, Europe entered what could only be described as a long winter. The brilliance of the hypocaust faded into memory, and the technology that once warmed villas and bathhouses simply vanished. What replaced it was far more primitive. A single open hearth, smoking at the center of a dark wooden hall. The floor was cold stone, the ceilings were high and drafty, and without chimneys, the smoke either drifted lazily toward a hole in the roof or stayed trapped inside, choking everyone beneath it. In this world, you faced a cruel choice every night: warmth with smoke or fresh air with cold sharp enough to bite the bones. So how did people endure winters that felt endless? They learned to stop heating the house, and instead, they heated themselves. The Middle Ages were an era of survival through microclimates, small, human-engineered pockets of warmth within a larger freezing space. The first survival tactic was the bed, but calling it a bed undersells the brilliance of the design. These were insulated chambers, curtained enclosures that trapped precious body heat. Thick drapes hung around the frame, transforming the bed into a miniature room within a room. People wore nightcaps not for fashion, but to keep heat from escaping their heads, and no one slept alone. Children, siblings, even parents often bundled together, because shared warmth could mean the difference between comfort and danger. The second tactic was portable heat. Before electricity, they relied on glowing stones, brass pans, and small metal boxes filled with embers. A bed warmer would be slid beneath the sheets moments before climbing in, turning icy linen into something survivable. Foot warmers, tiny metal furnaces, were tucked under robes during church or carried into carriages. For many people, these little pockets of heat were a lifeline. And the third tactic, perhaps the least glamorous, was the warmth of animals. In countless cottages across Europe, livestock didn't sleep in barns. They slept in the main room with the family. The combined body heat of cows, goats, or pigs could raise the indoor temperature by several degrees. It was loud, messy, and far from romantic, but it kept people alive. Now pause for a moment and consider your own home. Today, we drift into separate rooms without a second thought. One person watching TV in the living room, another scrolling in the bedroom, each space warmed effortlessly by central heat. But in the medieval world, the hearth was the only warm spot. It was the gravitational center of family life. Everyone gathered around it because they had no choice, and because survival demanded closeness. So here is the question that lingers from that era. Did central heating give us comfort, but cost us connection? The long winter of the Middle Ages reminds us that warmth is more than a temperature. It is a shared experience, a form of togetherness, and sometimes the very thing that keeps us alive. The game changers, Chimneys and Franklin. As Europe pushed forward into the Middle Ages, One invention quietly reshaped the very architecture of the home. It wasn't grand like a cathedral or mighty like a castle wall. It was simple, vertical, and revolutionary. The chimney. By the 12th century, this brick column changed everything. Suddenly, the fire no longer had to sit in the center of the great hall, choking the air and staining the rafters. Fireplaces could be moved to the walls, freeing up floor space and allowing homes to grow taller. Multi-story living, once impossible with a central open hearth, became feasible. Civilization climbed upward because smoke finally had a place to go. But even with chimneys, the open fireplace had a fatal flaw. It wasted heat with ruthless efficiency. Warm air that should have stayed inside was sucked upward and lost to the sky, and so the old saying emerged: a fireplace roasts your face while freezing your back. Centuries passed, forests thinned, and by the 1740s, the American colonies were facing a crisis of their own. Wood, the lifeblood of winter survival, was disappearing. People were burning entire forests, merely to keep their homes barely warm. Something had to change, and into that moment stepped a man who rarely accepted the world as it was: Benjamin Franklin. In 1741, Franklin unveiled the Pennsylvania fireplace, later known as the Franklin stove, an innovation born not from luxury, but from necessity. Imagine a metal-lined chamber standing proudly in the center of the room, reshaping the way heat behaved. Franklin designed an ingenious inverted siphon system that pulled hot fumes downward and guided them through a baffled pathway before allowing them to escape. The smoke worked harder, the heat stayed longer, and the room, for the first time, warmed efficiently from within. The result was astonishing: twice the heat, using only 1/4 of the wood. And in an age when patents could make a man rich, Franklin refused to take one. He believed warmth should be shared, writing, "As we enjoy great advantages from the inventions of others, we should be glad of an opportunity to serve others by any invention of ours." This was more than comfort. It was a philosophy, a recognition that wasting fuel, whether wood in the 18th century or energy today, threatens the stability of society. Franklin saw inefficiency not as an inconvenience, but as a danger. And his solution reminds us of a powerful truth: that innovation is not merely about making life easier, but about preserving the world we depend on. As we debate sustainability and energy use in our own time, Franklin's stove stands as a reminder that progress often begins with a single, elegant idea, one that saves resources, protects communities, and warms far more than just a room. The Industrial Revolution, steam and iron. As the world marched into the 19th century, everything changed. The old glow of the open hearth, once the center of every home, began to fade, not because people no longer needed heat, but because a new force had arrived. A force that could reshape industries, rewrite city skylines, and redefine what warmth meant to human civilization. That force was steam. It began quietly in the late 1700s, when James Watt, whose name is now stamped on every measurement of power, used a central boiler and a network of pipes to heat his own home. It was a personal experiment, a glimpse of a future no one else could yet see. But the true breakthrough came in 1855, thanks to a Russian businessman with an engineer's imagination, Franz Sangalli. His invention, simple in form, revolutionary in impact, was the radiator, a cast iron vessel capable of taking the fire from the basement and distributing its warmth to every room above. For the first time, heat could travel, it could flow, it could be shared throughout an entire building without a single flame ever touching the living space. This was the birth of central heating as we know it, and its influence spread far beyond the home. It shaped entire cities. Consider New York. Without central heating, skyscrapers would have been impossible. Imagine hauling coal up 40 flights of stairs, feeding a fireplace in every office. No building could function that way. No city could grow vertically. Steam didn't just warm rooms, it allowed civilization to reach the sky. Then came Birdsell Hawley, a man with a vision that stretched beyond individual buildings. In 1877, he dug up the streets of Lockport, New York, and laid underground pipes to distribute steam from a single boiler to an entire town. 5 years later, Manhattan adopted the idea. Even today, beneath the roar of traffic and the glow of neon lights, a vast network of steam pipes continues to heat icons like the Empire State Building and the United Nations. Yet every solution brings new problems. By 1885, coal had overtaken wood as the world's primary fuel. It burned hotter and lasted longer, but it blanketed Victorian cities in a poisonous haze. Chimneys belched constant smoke, turning entire skylines gray. People no longer froze, but they inhaled pollution with every breath. And so, the Industrial Revolution represents a profound trade-off. Humanity escaped the fragility of winter, but in doing so, stepped into a new struggle, one between comfort and consequence. Steam and iron lifted us into the modern age, but they also remind us that every innovation carries a price, and that the quest for warmth has never been as simple as lighting a fire. The unsung hero, Alice Parker. As central heating evolved from roaring furnaces to networks of steam and iron, one final leap was needed to bring us into the true modern age, and that leap came not from a famous industrialist, nor from a celebrated scientist, but from a woman history almost forgot. Her name was Alice H. Parker. Picture the year 1919. Winter was still a season of labor. Homes depended on coal or wood, demanding endless shoveling, chopping, and hauling. Heating was uneven and unpredictable. One room blazing hot, another freezing cold. Comfort required constant work. But Alice Parker looked at that struggle and imagined something entirely different. She asked a question so simple, yet so revolutionary. What if heat could flow through a home the way blood flows through a body? Warm, steady, and intelligently directed. Her answer became a patent that reshaped the world. Parker designed a system that used natural gas instead of wood or coal. Cool air was pulled into a furnace, heated efficiently, and then guided through a network of ducts into separate rooms. For the first time, a home could be warmed without a firebox roaring in the corner, and without a human being chained to the exhausting cycle of refueling. This was the blueprint for the modern HVAC system, the very logic behind the thermostats, vents, and climate controls we rely on today. Alice Parker didn't just invent a new heater. She reimagined the relationship between humans and warmth. She saw a future where comfort was clean, reliable, and accessible. A future where you didn't need to brave the cold to haul fuel or tend a flame. A future where temperature could be controlled room by room, tailored to the needs of every person in the house. In many ways, she is the mother of the modern gas furnace, and one of the most important contributors to the heating technologies that keep millions of people warm each winter. Yet her name is rarely spoken. Her story remains hidden in the margins. And so this chapter of our journey reminds us that innovation often comes from unexpected voices, voices that challenge the status quo, see what others overlook, and imagine a world that doesn't yet exist. May carry the legacy of Alice Parker. The thermostat, automating comfort. Even after the rise of boilers, radiators, and Alice Parker's visionary gas-powered heating system, one problem still haunted every building: control. Heat was powerful, yes, but without precision, it was unpredictable. A home could swing from freezing cold to blistering hot within minutes. Someone always had to adjust a damper, open a valve, or stoke a fire. And if that person fell asleep, the entire house paid the price. Which brings us to an innovation born not from engineering labs or industrial giants, but from a single frustrated teacher. In 1883, Professor Warren Johnson of Wisconsin had finally had enough. His classroom swung wildly between two miserable extremes, icy or suffocating, and the one person who could fix it, the janitor, was never there at the right moment. Rather than accept discomfort, Johnson did what problem solvers have always done. He invented a solution. His device? The world's first electric thermostat. At the heart of his invention was a simple but brilliant mechanism, a bimetallic strip. Two different metals fused together, expanding at different rates as the temperature changed. As the room grew warm or cold, the strip bent, just slightly, yet enough to activate a switch. That movement rang a bell in the basement, alerting the janitor to adjust the furnace. But what Johnson sparked didn't stay a bell and buzzer system for long. It evolved, Quickly, that same technology soon became automatic, controlling heat without human intervention. For the first time in human history, a person could set a desired temperature, walk away, and trust the system to maintain it. We had, in a very real sense, tamed the weather inside our homes, and this transformed more than comfort. It transformed life. The rhythm of heating no longer depended on constant vigilance. Nights became safer, mornings became easier, workplaces became bearable. The thermostat became the quiet sentinel of modern civilization, turning cold into something manageable, something we no longer feared. This tiny device, bending metal, a simple circuit, became the bridge between raw heat and intelligent climate control. And in doing so, it brought us one step closer to the world we recognize today. The sociological shift. By the time central heating became a standard feature of the modern home, its influence reached far beyond temperature. It didn't just warm rooms, it rewired society itself. And to understand how deeply it transformed daily life, we have to look not at the machines, but at the people who lived with them. At the turn of the 20th century, in the year 1900, the average household spent a staggering 58 hours each week on housework. Much of that time was consumed by what many women called the tyranny of the fire, hauling coal in heavy buckets, clearing ash, scrubbing soot from walls and curtains, boiling water on a hot stove, and feeding countless small flames that powered cooking, laundry, and survival. The home was, quite literally, a workplace built around managing heat. But when central heating and electricity finally entered households, something extraordinary happened. That burden collapsed. The relentless cycle of tending fires disappeared almost overnight. Suddenly, warmth required no physical labor at all. You could turn a dial instead of swinging an axe. You could heat a room without hauling a single log. And this shift did more than make homes cleaner and safer. It liberated time. It freed energy. And in doing so, it opened a path for millions of women to step into schools, offices, and public life in ways previously unimaginable. The rise of appliances, including automated heating, played an unsung role in reshaping the modern workforce. Yet deeper changes were happening too, changes inside the walls of the home itself. For thousands of years, the family gathered around a single fire because they had no choice. The hearth was the warmest and often the only warm spot in the house. It forged closeness, it created shared routines, it made the family a single thermal unit, bound together by necessity. But with central heating, every room became livable. Children could play in their bedrooms. Teenagers gained the freedom to close their doors, creating pockets of solitude unheard of in earlier centuries. Parents and children no longer converged around one glowing center. They dispersed. Privacy increased, but communal life thinned. And so we're left with a question that lingers like a faint chill in a warm room. In gaining comfort, did we lose the hearth? Did the invention that freed our time also quietly dissolve the invisible threads that once bound families together? The sociological shift reminds us that technology doesn't just change how we live. It changes where we live, how we gather, and whether we gather at all. Conclusion: the legacy of warmth. As we arrive at the final chapter of this journey, imagine yourself walking through a snowy landscape. The world is silent except for the crunch of your boots. Ahead, windows glow with soft golden light, proof that inside, somewhere, warmth awaits. Because today we stand at the end of a 2 million-year struggle. Humanity has traveled from the smoky, firelit caves of our earliest ancestors, to the radiant floors of Roman villas, to the drafty medieval halls where families huddled under curtains, and finally into the age of smart thermostats, where we can command heat with a tap of the screen. We have, in many ways, conquered the cold, yet looking back reminds us of something deeper. Our ancestors had no insulation ratings, no thermostatic sensors, no efficient furnaces humming quietly in the night. What they did have was grit, ingenuity, a profound understanding of their environment. They learned to survive with hot stones tucked into bedding, with animal skins layered for insulation, with body heat shared in quiet circles during long winter nights. They didn't just fight the cold, they studied it, respected it, and adapted to it. And there's a lesson in that resilience. So the next time you hear your furnace come alive, or you casually adjust your thermostat without thinking, pause for a moment. You are experiencing a luxury so extraordinary that emperors themselves could not have imagined it. Centuries of innovation, some forgotten, some celebrated, brought you this simple comfort. But before we end, let me leave you with a question that matters far more than it seems. If the power grid went down tomorrow, if the gas lines went silent, if the conveniences we trust vanished in an instant, would you know how to keep your family warm? Perhaps now is the moment to relearn the lessons of the hearth, to understand the fundamentals of warmth the way our ancestors did, not out of nostalgia, but out of wisdom. Because history doesn't just tell us where we came from, it teaches us how to endure whatever comes next. I'm Ken, and this is Historia Prime. If you enjoyed this journey through the cold and the incredible story of how humans battled it, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe for more hidden histories of the world around you. Stay warm out there.